All right, shalom, shalom. This is part two, August 15th, 2022. Understanding where we are now when it comes to the kingdom of heaven and man's constitution. Okay. Um. Now the beast is partly weak and partly strong, meaning the Antichrist, the beast system, world economic system is partly weak and partly strong, and it will be continued that way until the Messiah comes. Okay. As we go through this economic problem, we're going to have more social unrest, more political unrest, and maybe even a spiritual, either a spiritual revival or a spiritual decline. But what I see is that this spiritual revival is going to be a diabolical, tyrannical, socialist, Marxist agenda. Okay? Um, because the communists, or I won't say the communists, but the agents of Satan have learned what works and what doesn't work. And the one thing that they know that they can't remove is the spiritual. They have to have the spiritual, because if this void is not filled, this void will be filled by the Holy Spirit. Okay, by the working of faith through the angels, through the Holy Spirit, through those who have faith, not religion, faith. Okay, there's a difference between religion and faith. Okay, you should look that word. A religion means rituals, means rituals that is done daily. Okay, a rigorous way of life that is done daily. That is a religion. That's not faith. Okay, that's just exercising. That's exercising the ideals of faith. Faith is that. Faith is that motivation, right? That the purpose and the plan of God is working in your favor. That's the that you can see. You can see all the rituals and the symbols working in your life without them being there. You don't need a church to know that God is working in your life. You don't need a cross on your neck to know that you have God in your heart. You understand? It is the actions of doing God's commandments, okay? And that you are being steadfast and faithful to those commandments. And being faithful and obedient to those commandments will bring blessings and favor upon your life, all right? Now, we're divided, okay? We're divided socially because we have a moral hazard now. People have not, and this is half and half, okay? People have not made a decision in their mind whether or not abortion is good, how we should deal with violent crimes, how we should deal with child trafficking or human trafficking, how we should deal with economic pressures, housing pressures, um, food pressures, um, political pressures. Should we be social to one another? Should we be capitalist to one another? Should we be a communal family to one another? And where does God stand in all of this? Now, a whole society will have all of these things working in tandem, okay? Not to the extreme in one and not to the extreme in the other. Having a capitalist model, a social model, a communal model, not communistic, but communal. That's what the real word should be. Communing model of assembly. Okay. Or in law we call it the diet. Okay, the way of life. How should it be? And since we have half the nation that don't have answers to those questions, we have a divide in our nation. Okay? We have a divide in our nation. And that divide will determine, right? Will be determined, right? Will be determined on its economic foundation. Okay? Bread, worship, or power. Bread is for the common folk, the labor folk. Okay? When Satan offered the Messiah bread, he offered him an easy way of achieving his way of life, his diet, okay? To solve his social and political problems. But that bread came with a sacrifice, okay? And that sacrifice was that he had to conform his worship or his being, right? Because worship is also being. Worship means it also means to emulate or have a mirror of the one that you have honor and noble respect to. So when we're worshiping God, we're worshiping in our actions, words, our deeds, and our speech. Okay, actions, words, deeds, and speech. That's how we're worshiping God in its true sense. Now there is another form of worship where we're on a vibratorial situation where you're giving praise and worship. That's also a speech. Okay, when you're giving praise and worship. Okay, but that's only one part of worship. And power. Power means to master or to have the ability to do. Okay. At the time that the Messiah was being tempted, he was tempted with power. He showed him all the kingdoms and said, you can have control over all these kingdoms. Okay? That was power he was showing him. And that brings up the ego of the things that you can do to people and have people done or have people do for you to fulfill your political and your social diet. Okay? Your way of life. And this is how Satan is going to tempt the people, or he's already got the people conditioned to be ready to receive to be ready to receive his form of worship, right? For either one of these things, bread or power. Okay? Now, you probably heard that it's hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. It's easier for a camel to enter into the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because a rich man has experienced power, worship, and bread. Right? He's experienced those things. And for him to give those things up will make him vulnerable to a way of life that he's not accustomed to. And that plays with his way of life in the political, social, spiritual, economic realms. Okay? And that is why it's hard for a rich man to get into heaven, because he's not willing to give up his power. He has to give up his power, right, to the Messiah, right? He has to give up his worship to the Almighty. And his bread, he has to have faith that the Most High will provide for him. You understand? He's not rigorously doing it with his own power and his own ingenuity. Okay? And that is why a lot of rich people have a hard time bowing the knee to His Majesty Yeshua HaMashiach. Okay? That's why you see poor people have more faith than rich people. Not to say that they don't have faith. This is just the reason why. Okay? Because of the way of life, the diet that they have. I'll see you on the third video. Thank you for your 10 minutes of your time. I hope that you gained something. Leave your questions, comments, and likes. And we'll see you on the next one. Shalom.